Hi, I'm Jacob Hornberger, a Libertarian candidate for president. The thing to remember about Memorial Day and all of the deaths of American soldiers who died in America's foreign wars in the 20th and 21st centuries is that all these deaths come at the hands of both Democrats and Republicans. In World War I, for example, President Wilson, a Democrat, leads America into that conflict with the aim of making the world safe for democracy and bringing a permanent end to Europe's wars. How ludicrous is that? All that Wilson's intervention did was set the stage for the rise of Adolf Hitler and then later U.S. interventionism into World War II. In the 1940 presidential campaign, Democrat President Franklin Roosevelt said to the American people that he would never sacrifice American boys in another foreign war. He was lying. In fact, he was doing everything he could to secretly embroil the United States into that war, knowing that the overwhelming sentiment of the American people was to stay out. After the Germans refused to take his bait in the Atlantic, he went into the Pacific and intentionally provoked the Japanese into attacking at Pearl Harbor or some other U.S. facility, which would give him the justification for getting involved in the European war. After that war was over, we get the national security state, which then converts the Soviet Union, which had ironically been a partner and ally of the United States during World War II, into a new official enemy. This launches the Cold War. This leads to the Korean War with a Democrat, President Truman, a civil war where tens of thousands of American soldiers were sacrificed because otherwise, they said, the Reds were coming to get us. Later on, you get the Vietnam War, with both a Democrat and a Republican, Lyndon Johnson and Richard Nixon. That was where they sacrificed 58,000 plus of my generation for no good reason at all, because they said that if they didn't, the dominoes would fall and the Reds would come and conquer the United States. Again, like the Korean War, no declaration of war by Congress, making these wars illegal under our form of government. Later, when the Cold War ends, they engage in the Persian Gulf War, Republican, George H.W. Bush. That leads to the sanctions against Iraq, which killed hundreds of thousands of Iraqi children, which ultimately leads to the 9/11 attacks. Those 9/11 attacks are then used as the justification for invading Afghanistan and Iraq, which leads to the deaths of more U.S. soldiers for no good reason at all. Again, undeclared wars, illegal under our form of government. As Martin Luther King pointed out back when he was alive, this is the greatest purveyor of violence in the world, the U.S. government. And now we see the U.S. government, through the national security establishment, using NATO as a way to gin up a new crisis there in Ukraine through the expansionary antics of NATO. And they're getting ever closer to ginning up a nuclear war between the United States and Russia, as well as the United States and China. And I guarantee you that if they succeed in ginning up this nuclear war between the United States and these powers, we're going to have a Memorial Day to celebrate that's going to be honoring the deaths of lots of soldiers as well as the deaths of a lot of Americans. And I think it's also important to point out here is all the deaths that these people in this greatest purveyor of violence have inflicted among foreigners. Maybe there ought to be a Memorial Day for all the people that they've killed as part of what Martin Luther King called the greatest purveyor of violence in history. These are Democrats and Republicans that have brought this death and destruction to our nation. And there's only one way out of this morass. If you reelect these people, you're going to get the same thing, perpetual war for perpetual peace. There's only one way out of this thing, and that's to restore America's founding heritage for more than 100 years of non-interventionism into foreign wars. And that means joining up with us libertarians. I'm Jacob Hornberger, Libertarian candidate for president. My campaign website is jacobforliberty.com.